What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to take a few minutes. This might be a little bit of a lengthy video, but I went ahead and did the long tube headers on Ruby. It was definitely an undertaking, to say the least. I had four guys come out, four of my good friends come out, and to do the install. We used a lift. We didn't get much video because it was pretty intuitive. Definitely a very intuitive job. So we did get a few pictures, but we're just going to do it the old-fashioned way, and I'm pretty much going to tell you the steps that you need to take to do the header install. First of all, I did get the Speed Daddy headers. I did a lot of research on the headers before I got them, and just everything I read about the headers just seemed to be the way to go. I think I spent $169 on the headers, and as opposed to, I think some guys out there are paying like $800 to $1,600 for headers. So 169 bucks, man, I couldn't pass it up. So anyway, I got the headers in. Was researching mid pipes, trying to figure out what we're going to do for mid pipes, because as you guys know, if you've done any research on the Speed Daddy headers, they don't make mid pipes for them. So on one of the forums, I found where a guy used his own factory mid pipes from the manifolds, and he was able to use that with couplers, flanges, two flanges, to connect to the actual Speed Daddy headers. So the guy provided me with the part number for the two flanges, and I'll provide you with that part number. I purchased the two flanges. I think I paid 10 bucks a piece for them, for the two flanges. They bolted right up to the end
part
of
number
the headers.
41726. It's a Walker
part number I'm going to give you,
adapter.
The part that actually bolts to the headers, it just barely fits over the end of the header. But when you connect the two flanges, the two bolts, it pulls it to the header, so that's not an issue. While you're using your manifold mid pipes, on the other end of the flange, the mid pipe goes into the flange. It's pretty loose. I would say there's probably about a 1/4 inch up top and a 1/4 inch down below from where the mid pipe is definitely smaller than the other side of the flange. What I did in that case was to get me to an exhaust shop, was I used a U-bolt clamp, and I was able to stick a 2.5 inch U-bolt clamp over top of it, and then bolted it down, and I was able to torque it tight enough to where it clamped everything together to where I could get to an exhaust shop and have them weld me a bead around where the mid pipe butts up or goes inside the flange. So be cautious of that. When I took the manifold off, I basically just measured to see how much distance I would have in between the header and my H pipe. That's going to vary, guys, depending on what H pipe, X pipe, or if you still have your factory resonator on the vehicle. The size that you're going to need cut off is going to vary depending. So therefore, I can't really provide you with a size on how long your mid pipe is going to have to be. You're just going to have to match it up once you get it up there, and see how long, or how much you need to cut it. So basically, that's how I connected my whole exhaust together, was through the factory mid pipe. I did go catless on it. I did not use the factory cats. I just went straight, basically off-road mid pipe on it. So that's completely up to you. If you want to use the cats, by all means use the cats. If you got somebody that will inspect your vehicle, if you have to have catalytic converters on it, then you can go catless like I did. So anyway, just kind of give you a tidbit as far as all that information goes. So obviously, just like anything else, the first thing you want to do is disconnect the battery, guys. I know you're really not going to be working much with the battery. However, you will be pulling the starter off the car. So definitely make sure the first thing you do is pull that red positive battery cable off the battery before you do any work. I would definitely suggest having a lift. Some guys have done it on their back on the ground. That's great. However, 4 of us with a lift took me a little more than 10 hours to do this job. It was a lot, definitely involved. So, undo the battery cable. We lifted the car up once we undid the battery cable, and one of the things we started doing, but we figured out is probably best not to do it that way, was we started taking the catalytic converter, the 2 bolts off of the manifold, and then we were going to take it apart that way. Guys, don't even worry about doing that. Just go ahead. First thing you want to do is take the starter off the car, completely disconnect the starter. I think it has 2 wires, if I'm not mistaken. There should be 3 bolts. There should be 2 bolts that you can see if you're looking up at it, and then there's 1 bolt at the very top. There's 2 bolts that you can see, and there's 1 bolt at the very top that you're going to have to disconnect to get the starter out. Once you do that, disconnect the wires and pull the starter out, and just put it off to the side. Once you get that done, you can go ahead and remove the right side. Motor mount. This gets a little tricky. We started doing the 2 bolts that connect the motor mount to the frame. As I was loosening the bolts, I noticed, truth be known, the bolt actually got tighter and tighter as I was loosening it. Actually scared me for a few minutes, thinking maybe that it was stripped for one reason or another. Don't let that worry you. It is going to be tight. What we did was we had one of my other guys climb up to the top of the lift, and we used a long extension, then ran it down beside the motor and connected that extension with a knuckle swivel. Put it on the bolt. He was at the top, and he was able to work the bolt off. That bolt, for whatever reason, if your car is anything like mine, is going to be tight. You're going to get scared. You're probably going to think that it's stripped, but keep working it. It's going to come out. So on the top of that motor mount, the part that's connected to the frame, you got 2 bolts, 1 on either side. Go ahead and take them 2 bolts off. Once you get them 2 bolts off, you're going to have 4 bolts that bolt the motor mount to the engine block. You're going to have 2 actual bolts, and then you're going to have 2 other bolts that look like threaded screws, and they're going to actually have a screw on them. The one that you immediately see to the left, you just loosen that screw, and then you can actually finger loosen it up towards the front of the car behind that motor mount. It's going to have 2 screws on it, or excuse me, 2 nuts on it. You're going to loosen one of the nuts, take that nut off. When you take that nut off, you should have a negative battery cable, or a negative power wire, or whatever, negative wire. You're going to pull that negative wire off, and then it's going to give you access to the next nut. Once you loosen that nut, it's going to allow you to finger loosen that screw and get that screw out. Once you get that out, then you should be able to go ahead and use a transmission jack. I did not, contrary to what everybody was saying, I did not use my oil pan to jack the transmission / the motor up. I took a block, I put it on the transmission jack, and then I slid that block as close to the oil pan as I could without actually getting it underneath the oil pan. So it was right on the transmission. Once I did that, I put a little, just very, very, very little bit of pressure on the transmission, just so I knew that everything was in place. So we got that right side motor mount out. You're going to have to kind of act like you're playing Tetris and move it all around different ways. You have to kind of twist it around, move it around, and kind of play Tetris with it, and eventually it'll come out with no problem. So now that you got that side undone, go ahead and go to the left side. what you're going to do on the left side, first thing you have to do is you're going to have to, there should be two, I want to say they're two T40 hex screws. You got to loosen the screws, pull them out, and this is going to be connected to your steering knuckle and your steering shaft, okay? So you'll see when you look over to the left side, you'll see your steering shaft coming down, and you're going to see the shaft is obviously inside the knuckle, and there's going to be a screw on the bottom and the screw on the top. They're T40 hex, T40. So you're going to loosen, pull the two screws out, and take the steering shaft, you're going to pull it up, and you actually pull the knuckle down a little bit, and then it'll pop down and come apart, and then you can actually pull the knuckle off and set it off to the side. What I like to do anytime I take parts like that apart, I like to take the screws and stick them back in the holes from where I got them, because if you're anything like me, my memory sucks. And later on, that's one less thing I have to worry about wondering where that screw went to. So, once you get the steering shaft off, disconnected, now you're going to have access to the motor mount. While I was doing it, learn from my mistakes, guys. That motor mount will not come off in one piece on the driver's side. You're going to have to take that motor mount off in two pieces in order to remove the motor mount from the engine compartment. So, in order to do that, like I said, learn from my mistakes. Go ahead and if you take your hand and put your hand on top of the motor mount, the part of the motor mount that's connected to the frame, there's a nut up there. Go ahead and loosen that nut and get that nut off of there. That's going to allow the motor mount to be disconnected in two different pieces. Once you take that nut off, then you can go ahead and do your two screws that connect to the frame, and then you're going to have your 4 bolts have the negative ground wire like the passenger side did, so you don't have to worry about that. That's one less step. But go ahead and loosen them 4 bolts. Loosen the 2 bolts that connected to the frame, and you're actually going to take the top of it off. That's going to be one piece of your motor mount, and then you're going to have the round piece, and you're going to pull that off. That's going to be your second piece of the motor mount. Like I said, if you don't do it the way I told you to do it, you're going to sit up there for 30 minutes playing around with it, trying to twist it one way or another, and keep on and keep on and keep on, and then you're going to realize, crap, the stupid thing won't come out. You're going to have to do what I did. You're going to have to screw the screws back in it so that you'll be able to get torque on that top nut, and it's just a pain in the butt. So just go ahead and take my advice, take my word for it, and go ahead and take that thing off in 2 different pieces and get it out of your way so you don't spend 30 minutes trying to figure out how to get it out of the hole. Once you get that out of the way, then or once you get that loose and everything, then you can go ahead and jack your engine up. Be careful when you're jacking your engine up. You don't want to put too much torque on the transmission, obviously. So once you start jacking it up, just jack it up slowly. I'd say I probably jacked it up maybe 4 or 5 inches or so. You'll know when you start putting torque and pressure on that transmission, and then that'll tell you when to stop. Once you get it jacked up, you can go ahead and make sure you remove your motor mounts and get them out of the way. Guys, once you get to that point, it's a beautiful sight. You can see your header bolts almost just as clear as day. The bottom ones are easy peasy. I think I had them done in probably 20 minutes, the bottom ones. That's going to be where the fun starts. So once you get your motor mounts out of the way, now you can start on your header bolts. I keep saying header bolts here. I mean the header nuts. If your car is on the lift, I did reuse all my studs and the nuts. Go ahead and start on your all the factory studs and the nuts. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I wasn't on top, just from hearing what the guy, Joe, what he was saying, or Ryan, one of the 2 that were up there. They were able to get 2 header bolts from the top on each side. The other 2 header bolts is on the person that's down below. The other 2 header bolts, them are the ones that are a bear. I'm not going to lie to you. They're a pain in the butt. You better make sure you have a shorty ratchet, or excuse me, a shorty wrench. They're definitely a pain in the butt to get to. So, yeah, Go ahead, it's going to take you probably an hour and a half or so just to loosen all them bolts and get them off. And then once you get to that point, you're pretty much ready to go ahead and remove your stock manifold. Obviously, come to the back of where your mid pipes are, wherever the mid pipes connect to your H pipe or X pipe, whatever you went with, and make sure that's disconnected. And once you got that disconnected, you can go ahead and remove your manifold. One thing that I've learned from reading all of the forums is to reuse your stock gaskets and studs and your header bolts. Or the header nuts. I reused all my old stuff. The only thing that's brand new when I did this job are the actual headers. I reused the gaskets and my header nuts. Everything fit perfect. You can take your manifold, take your new headers, put your headers up there, and set them in place. At least one side at a time, obviously. Set your header up there in place, and then you can take your mid pipe and line that up to your H pipe, X pipe, or your stock resonator, whatever you have. And this is where you can measure to see how long or how big of a cut you're going to need. Once you figure that out, go ahead and make your cut. And once you make your cut, you can go ahead and start attaching things. So now you're ready to go ahead and put your headers on. You're going to take your right side headers, what we started with. We put a right side header up there. Like I said, we left the studs, the head studs in there. We lined it up, hung it on the studs, went on without an issue. We had somebody up top. He put the two top nuts on, and then somebody was on the bottom, put the bottom nuts on. And at that point, we went ahead and measured. We made sure everything lined up for our mid pipes. We hooked our mid pipes up, and then we were able to start torquing the header nuts down on the right side. Once we got all that done, we stopped there, went over to the left side, did the same thing with the left side headers. Issue we had, just like everybody, and I read this, everybody said it, all the forums said it with these Speed Daddy headers, was there's not enough clearance between the steering shaft / knuckle and the headers on the driver's side. Once I got the header up there, got it all bolted down, we went ahead and put the motor mount back in. Like I said, your driver's side motor mount comes in two pieces. You had to take it apart in two pieces to get it out. You're just going to go in the same way, put it all back together the same way. And then we put the steering shaft, steering knuckle back together. When I did that, guys, it was touching my headers. I know it sucks. Not a good situation to be in, but $169 headers as opposed to $800 headers that saved me $650. I hated to do it, but now's the time that you go ahead and dent your header. And at least that's how I did it. Totally up to you on how you want to do it. I just went ahead and dented my header. It takes a lot to dent these headers, let me tell you. But I was able to get it dented enough to where I didn't have any issues. So go ahead and dent that header where the steering knuckle meets, or the steering shaft. I don't think the knuckle was a problem for me. I think it was the actual shaft that was actually matching up to the header. So dent that. Make sure you don't have no fitment issues there. And then once you got that dented and everything, then you can go ahead and start on the right side. Go ahead on the right side. Once you make sure you got all your header nuts tightened down, then you can go start putting things back together. You put your motor mount back in. You can go ahead and put your starter back on. And once you get your motor mount and your starter back on, you can slowly lower the engine back down onto the motor mounts and make sure that everything's lined up properly. Make sure all your nuts are tightened. One thing that I did forget to mention is the O2 sensors. I did buy O2 extensions. With these Speed Daddy headers, you're going to need the O2 extensions. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. My passenger side O2, even with the extension, that wire is pretty tight. I'm not too concerned with it because I know that the headers are not going to be moving much or have much play or much give. So I just allowed it to be tight. However, I did use the extension and it's still pretty tight. So ensure you use your O2 extensions in this case. So once I did that, I put of course, all my O2 sensors. I did not need the rear O2 sensors. I used the front O2 sensors, and them are the ones that actually attach to the Speed Daddy headers with the extensions, obviously. So once the O2 sensors were in, I made sure the motor mount bolts were tight. All the motor mount bolts were tight. I put the starter back on. I reconnected it. Made sure that all the connections were there. Don't forget, when you put that the motor mount on the passenger side back in, make sure that you connect that negative terminal to the to that one bolt there at the passenger side motor mount. I'll be honest with you, I didn't trace it to see where it goes. However, it is black, so we all know that if it's a black wire, typically it's a negative ground wire. My assumption is it's a ground wire, but I don't know where it goes. So anyway, make sure you connect that back to the motor mount bolt. Once you make sure all your bolts and everything were tight and everything's hooked up, if you haven't already, lower your motor down, make sure everything's tight, and you're pretty much done at that point. Just go through and make sure that you double check everything to make sure that everything's where it needs to be. I don't think there's much more, guys. Make sure you have your tune before you do all this too, because your tune's going to be the most important thing, because if you don't have your tune, then you're going to be spitting codes out left and right, and with your headers and your O2 sensors. So anyway, guys, that's pretty much point A to point B. I'm sorry I don't have a video on it. I will post some pictures. There were a lot of injuries that we had during this install. I've got a few little cuts and scrapes and nice little cut on my leg. I know Ryan, he ended up with a decent sized gouge on his forehead, but then again, it was his head, so we knew he didn't hurt anything there. I know Steve, he ended up with a nice little cut on his leg. I've got a few bumps and bruises on my head from coming up too fast and hitting the bottom of the lift. By the way, metal does not give. But anyway, all in all, the job just sucked. Just plain and simple, it sucked to do by yourself. If you've got the money to have somebody do it, that's up to you. It's definitely, I'm not going to tell you that it wasn't a headache, literally. It took us about 10 hours to do it from start to finish. First time I've ever done an install like this. So, the first hour and a half or so was just pretty much just looking at the car. Looking to see where everything was at. Looking to see where the bolts were. Trying to figure out game plan and figure out what needed to be done first and what needed to be loosened. What tools we were going to need. I'm not going to tell you that it was an easy job, because it was by far an easy job. But me and a couple friends, we had a great time hanging out, and it's definitely a good time to get that camaraderie with your buddies, and we had fun. Again, it was a lot of work, but it did save me anywhere from $600 to $1,000 installation charge. So thanks to Steve, Joe, Brian. Ryan's son was out there. He helped us out. And then Lindsay, she brought some pizza. Even I had already ordered some. She did bring some pizza and drinks out for us. So, man, just super thanks to everybody that came out and helped us out. It was a great time we had, and I think yeah, it was a good time. So anyway, some of the tools you're going to need real quick. Definitely an O2 tool so you can tighten down your O2 sensor. 15 millimeter deep well, 3/8 inch ratchet. You're going to need some shorty wrenches. Some ratchet wrenches are a lifesaver. Any type of power tools you have, 3/8 inch power drive, air ratchet be a good idea. Long extensions, they're a must, and some good swivel knuckles are definitely a must also. So them are some of the tools you're going to need for the job. So look guys, it was a great time. We had fun. I was sore and tired the next day, but all in all, the car runs great. The car sounds great. I've got 2 more weeks, and we're going to go down and do a dyno tune on the car. Right now, it just has a safe tune in it to get me until the 2 weeks to get down there and get the actual dyno tune. But when I got done, I didn't throw any codes. Thank God. That was definitely a answer to prayer. But like I said, it was fun, and if you want to tackle it yourself, go for it. If you got a few friends that don't mind coming over and helping out, then if you got some type of skills, mechanical skills, then I would say go for it. But anyway, listen, guys, like I said, sorry I don't have a video, but if you liked what we talked about today, if you're interested in it, if you have any questions about the install, comment below. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up, a like, and subscribe to the channel, and because there'll definitely be a lot more how-to DIY videos coming up. So if you have any questions, hit me up, let me know. Have a good night. Out.